Thank you.
An invitation for Ukraine to join NATO when allies agree and conditions are met. This is a strong package for Ukraine and a clear path towards its membership in NATO.
This is my video update from Nicosia, Cyprus on this Wednesday, July the 12th. Let's talk about some news, and of course we are going to discuss day one of the Vilnius NATO summit. And they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, this is the picture that defines the NATO summit, and I believe this photo was taken right before the world leaders were to attend a NATO Vilnius summit dinner. By the way, Biden decided not to attend this dinner. He actually skipped the NATO dinner. But here is Elensky all by himself. Actually, his wife is right off to the side. Elensky does not look very happy. He looks very upset and annoyed with everything that has unfolded during the first day of the summit. Elensky's wife looks pretty happy. She seems to be having a good time in Vilnius. Elensky, not so much. And Elensky, he actually has green dress shirts. So he's sticking with the green. A year and a half into this conflict, and he is still wearing green every single day. Military green every single day. This is like method acting to the extreme. I think a year and a half into this, it's okay for Elensky now to wear a suit. I think it's okay for him to wear a different color. It'll be all right. We get it. We get the role that he's playing. We understand the message that he's trying to convey. But I think that at this NATO summit, this Vilnius summit, it would be appropriate if he were to suit up. ditch the green, dress shirt, ditch the camouflage pants, and wear a suit for this NATO summit. But anyway, that's the picture, everybody. That is the picture that will define this summit. Actually, I created a meme this morning. Let me put it up on the screen. I think that meme also defines this summit, because the entire summit was going to be about Ukraine until Sweden's entry into NATO stole Elensky's thunder. And NATO, all the NATO member states, they were focused on Sweden entering NATO. That was the big story. And that's what the media ran with. That's what the media talked about. That was the big win for this Vilnius summit. Erdogan given the green light to Sweden to enter the alliance. And no one is really talking about Ukraine and what happened to Ukraine on day one of this Vilnius summit. At least the collective West media is not talking so much about it, because it was a huge L, a huge failure for the Elensky regime and for Project Ukraine. So the big story that is getting all of the attention from this NATO summit is Sweden's entry into the alliance. That was the big media win. And so Ukraine entering NATO, don't know what you guys are talking about. Sweden entering NATO? Yeah, let's talk about that one. Let's discuss how the alliance is growing and how it's expanding and how it's stronger than ever. And Vladimir Putin, he wanted to hurt NATO. He wanted to destroy NATO. But now look, Finland is in NATO. Sweden is in NATO. All is good. And what about Ukraine? Don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you are talking about. So what happened in day one of the NATO summit? Well, Ukraine got essentially nothing. They essentially got nothing. They got no set timeline as to when they're going to enter the alliance. They got no real process put in place as to how to enter the alliance, they really got nothing. They got a whole bunch of promises, but that's about it. As a matter of fact, Stoltenberg, he came out with a statement and said Ukraine will enter NATO when conditions are met. That was it. When conditions are met. All right. That was a statement. That's the result of 1.5 years of destroying your country so that you can enter NATO. That was the result. You're going to enter NATO when conditions are met. No dates, no commitments. Everything was left open-ended. And basically the message to Elensky and to Ukraine was, keep on fighting. We'll give you weapons, just enough weapons to keep you fighting. And when we feel like it, if you guys manage to pull off a miracle and break through, we'll consider your entry into NATO. What a waste of 1.5 years for the Zelensky regime. They destroyed their entire country to fight for NATO, and that's what he was rewarded with. Until conditions are met, that's when you're going to get into the alliance. Keep fighting now. Go back and keep fighting. So Elensky was very, very upset with, or at least he acted like he was very upset with the statement from the alliance, and he took to Twitter to express his anger. And this is what he tweeted. We value our allies. We value our shared security, and we always appreciate an open conversation. Ukraine will be represented at the NATO summit in Vilnius because it is about respect. But Ukraine also deserves respect. Now, on the way to Vilnius, we received signals that certain wording is being discussed without Ukraine. And I would like to emphasize that this wording is about the invitation to become NATO member, not about Ukraine's membership. It's unprecedented and absurd when time frame is not set, neither for the invitation nor for Ukraine's membership, while at the same time, vague wording about conditions is added even for inviting Ukraine. It seems there is no readiness neither to invite Ukraine to NATO nor to make it a member of the alliance. This means that a window of opportunity is being left to bargain Ukraine's membership in NATO in negotiations with Russia. And for Russia, this means motivation to continue its terror. Uncertainty is weakness, and I will openly discuss this at the summit. He was upset. He was very upset. And this tweet that he put out, where he demanded respect, it actually ended up upsetting the NATO member states. So they were upset with Elensky demanding respect. That's the effect of all of this. Actually, the Washington Post, they put out an article saying that NATO member states are annoyed with Elensky's tweets where he demands respect from NATO. This is what the Washington Post wrote. NATO says it will invite Ukraine to join when conditions are met. Zelensky calls lack of timeline absurd. And then the Washington Post, as well as the Guardian and the New York Times, they all talked about how NATO member states, they thought that Elensky's tweet and his words were very ungrateful, given all the amounts of money and weapons they have sent to Ukraine. And, you know, I've been saying for a while now that if there's one thing that Elensky does not have, it's charm. Do not send this guy out to charm people. When people interact with Elensky, they actually end up despising him. He's not a charming guy. He doesn't understand diplomacy. He's not a diplomat. He's not very likable. And so they send him around to meet with world leaders around the world, to meet with world leaders, or maybe he just doesn't want to be in Ukraine. So he's pushing the collective West to send him on trips outside of Ukraine, and he meets with world leaders, and he ends up pissing them off. And so he travels to Vilnius, and he comes out with these statements about how he demands respect, and it annoys the NATO member states. That's what happens when you send Elensky out on a road trip, on a charm offensive. He demands respect. It reminds me of the, because it's all so dramatic for him. You know, he's really playing it up. I demand respect. It reminds me of The Godfather 3. Not the best Godfather movie, but still not a bad movie. And Joe Montana, who was playing Joey Zaza. Remember that scene where they were at the hotel in Atlantic City, and Michael Corleone, he's trying to become legitimate and to partner up with the Vatican and the company that the Vatican has. He's trying to buy that out, and so he's cashing out of the mafia business, and he pays off all of the other mafia bosses, but he leaves Joey Zaza out. And Joey Zaza gets in front of the mafia bosses, and he makes his speech. He's like, I've made you a lot of money over the years, and I've asked for little. I've given a lot, but I've asked for little. And today I don't even get respect. That's what Joey Zaza was telling the mafia, the heads of the families. And today I get no respect. And then he says, I have not received, so I will take. He says something like that. It's all very dramatic. And then the helicopter comes and it just annihilates all of the mafia bosses. They put a hit on all the mafia bosses, and they kill all of them. And the hit was arranged. Spoiler: the hit was arranged by Joey Zaza. Anyway, I'm getting into a movie review, but that's what this reminded me of. I could see Elensky like standing up at the table with all the NATO members, all the heads of the NATO countries. I can see Zelensky getting up in front of the NATO members and saying, I've given so much to this alliance, and I've asked for little. And today, you have disrespected me. Today, you disrespect me. You will not give, so I will take. So yeah, it was quite an incredible first day at the NATO meeting. The incredible part being how they have no interest in getting Ukraine into the alliance, and the reason they don't want to let Ukraine into the alliance is because Ukraine failed in the big counteroffensive. Actually, the president of the Czech Republic, Pavel, he even came out with a statement and said, "Look, you have until winter, until Christmas." That's what he said. You have until Christmas time. Whatever territory you manage to get, you get, and that's going to be the end of this. And then you have to negotiate with Russia. So try to grab whatever territory you can, he said, and that'll be what you have to work with as we negotiate an end to this with Russia. That is what the Czech president pretty much told Ukraine. So today, what we're going to see is a whole bunch of bilateral meetings, and Elensky's going to sit down with Biden and with Sunak, and I imagine Macron and Schultz and pretty much all the G7 nations, Meloni, and they're going to sign bilateral deals with Duda, and they're going to sign deals for more weapons and for more money, and they're going to put it down on paper, and they're both going to sign. Both leaders are going to sign on these documents, and they're going to get a whole bunch of photos and shake hands, and they're going to be all smiles because they've signed security guarantees. But these security guarantees are nothing. This is not a treaty. This is nothing that's going to be binding. This is nothing that's going to have to be ratified by the parliaments or the Congress of the countries that sign these agreements. Basically, all they're doing is saying, we'll give you weapons and money, and here's a document saying that we're going to give you weapons and money, but it's non-binding. So really, day 2 of the NATO summit is going to be nothing new. It's going to be all show. That's all it's going to be. They're going to paper over. They're going to try to paper over the snub that occurred for Ukraine on day one. Even Jake Sullivan, he came out with a statement to, who was he speaking to? I believe MSNBC. And Jake Sullivan said that Ukraine will not be part of NATO today. It's not going to happen. They're not even going to get an invitation to NATO. And Sullivan told MSNBC that what is going to happen is that sometime in the future, he didn't want to put a timeline. He refused to put a timeline on this, but he said sometime in the future, we're going to create a path to reform Ukraine so that we can get it to a position where it can then get an invitation to join NATO. That's what he told MSNBC. But he told MSNBC, I can't put a timeline on this. I have no idea. And he said, I don't want to put a timeline on this. And, you know, when I read Jake Sullivan's statement with his interview to MSNBC, I thought that, or I don't know, I have a feeling that Sullivan was actually addressing his statements to Russia. Just a hunch. It's just a hunch, but I think Sullivan is signaling to Russia, help me get an off-ramp from this mess. Let's do something that doesn't embarrass Biden as or the Democrat Party as we have an election campaign, and just help me get out of this mess, and let's end this thing. Until then, we'll keep Ukraine afloat. We'll give them whatever we can give them because they don't have much anymore to give them, but we'll give them what we can give them to keep them fighting. But help me out, Russia. That's kind of what I got from Sullivan's statement. I don't think he was addressing this to Ukraine or to NATO or to the G7 or the EU, the collective West. I think he was actually signaling to Russia, let's find an off-ramp, but let's make it an off-ramp that doesn't embarrass the Biden White House. That's just a hunch. That is just a hunch there. But Blinken, he actually came out with a statement, and he confirmed what Bidenopolis said to CNN, to Fareed Zakaria the other day. Blinken actually said that, yes, the United States is out of ammunition. That's what Blinken said. There is no more ammo for the U.S. to give to Ukraine. So Blinken comes out, he confirms what Biden said to Zakaria a couple of days ago. And actually, Blinken even took it further, and he said that we have to give Ukraine cluster munitions because that's all we got. That's it. He says if we don't give Ukraine these cluster munitions, they're finished. There's no more 155 mm ammo left. So we had no choice. That's what Blinken said. We had no choice. To keep Ukraine fighting, not winning, not progressing in this counteroffensive, just to keep them on life support, we have to give them cluster munitions. And everyone is now saying, all the military experts are saying that the cluster munitions are not going to help. They're not going to make one bit of difference. Actually, Shoigu even came out with a statement, and Shoigu, he said, which way should I go? Should I go that way? Let's go that way. Shoigu came out and said that we've got more cluster munitions than the U.S. has. That's what he said. We have a whole bunch of cluster munitions, and if we have to, he didn't say Russia is going to, but he said if there is a need, then we can also pull out our huge stockpiles of cluster munitions that we have, and we can not only match what you're giving Ukraine, but we can far exceed it. So it's a no-win situation, but it's Blinken's admission that it's all the U.S. has to keep Ukraine fighting in this conflict. That's all they have left are these cluster munitions. And all the experts say that the U.S. and the EU, they are not going to be able to ramp up production in the near future. In the medium term, in the long term, they're not going to be able to match Russia's production of ammunition. So we're heading towards an end game. That's why I think Sullivan's statement is a signal to Russia. So in the next 3, 4, 5 months, and then you have Pavel's statement as well from the Czech Republic, I think in the next 3, 4 months, expect some moves from the Biden White House to try and figure out some sort of off-ramp that saves face for Biden. Just a hunch. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's a possibility. So what else happened on day one of NATO? Let me summarize a bit of some of the decisions and the communique that NATO put out to all of us at the conclusion of day one. The communique that they published. Pretty much NATO said that they don't see the NATO alliance using nukes. They don't see nuclear weapons being used in this conflict. NATO said that countries around the world should stop supporting Russia. They said countries around the world should stop supporting China. They said China and Russia are bad. The NATO communique said that Iran is bad. They said that Belarus is bad. The agreement between Belarus and Russia is dangerous and bad. Iran getting nuclear weapons is bad. But NATO also said that they are keeping channels of communication open with Moscow. They did say that. They also said that they're looking at Serbia. They definitely want to try to get Serbia into NATO. They mentioned that in their communique as well. And they talked about NATO Asia Pacific. They said they're going to continue to explore NATO in Asia and work with partners in Asia. Oh, and they also said that NATO is going to go to space. They said that NATO in space is a priority. And of course, more weapons, or whatever weapons they can put together for Ukraine. France announced that it's going to give long-range missiles to Ukraine. The Biden White House is now seriously considering giving ATACMS to the Elensky regime. You know, keep them afloat. Keep them afloat until they can find an off-ramp to this. So keep them afloat, keep the Zelensky regime afloat for 3, 4, 5 more months. And then I suspect that the Biden White House is going to start to look for some sort of way out of this mess. Shoigu, he came out with a statement of Ukrainian casualties from June 4th up to today. In other words, the total amount of casualties from the Ukraine military since they launched this big counteroffensive. And the number that Shoigu came up with was 26,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been lost in this big counteroffensive. 26,000. Now, if you take the high end of how many soldiers NATO said they trained for this big counteroffensive, which is 60,000, and I'm taking the high end, pretty much half of the NATO trained Ukrainian forces have been taken out by the Russian military. He also said that 1,244 tanks have also been destroyed, plus Bradleys and other vehicles, or maybe he said 1,244 total vehicles. I forgot what he said exactly the number, but basically he said that Russia has destroyed a boatload of vehicles and tanks and artillery, and it's been a disaster for Ukraine. This offensive has been a complete disaster. So that was the statement from Shoigu, and we also had the news. Since we were talking about cluster munitions, we had the news that Ukraine, during this conference, the Ukraine military decided to use cluster munitions in a town, a village known as Tokmak in Zaporozhye. And this means that, as they always do, the collective West has already sent the United States, they've already provided Ukraine with the cluster munitions. So they announced something which they've already done, which is what they've always been doing with the weapons. They say that they're going to give depleted uranium, for example, to Ukraine, but they've already delivered that depleted uranium. So they've already delivered the cluster munitions to Ukraine, and Ukraine used them in Zaporozhye. And I think I can go to a clown world. Two more quick stories. The counteroffensive is going very, very bad for Ukraine, but an offensive looks to be going very, very good for Russia. By the way, I'm at the University of Cyprus. I believe this is the IT campus for the University of Cyprus. And of course, it's summertime, so there's not many people around. But just so you know where I am on this very, very hot Nicosia day. But yeah, Russia is on the offensive. They're making progress in the Liman direction. They're also making progress, from what I understand, in Avdiivka. So there is an offensive that is being launched that is successful, or that looks successful, and that is Russia's offensive. So that's what's going on the battlefield in Ukraine. And we had protests in Bulgaria, very large protests in Bulgaria against weapons and military aid to Ukraine. And it does look like that if there's one country in Europe that is rising up and is saying enough of this nonsense, enough of the military aid, enough of the money to Ukraine, it is Bulgaria. Listen to the cicadas. I love the sound of cicadas. So that is my final story. We can now get to a clown world. I've got two clown worlds. The first clown world is the Spanish climate minister. I'm sure you've all seen the video where the minister of climate or the environment, I forgot her name, but from Spain, she traveled. I don't even know where she was traveling to, but she made a trip somewhere in Europe, maybe Vilnius, I don't know. But she flew on a private jet to this destination. She took a limousine to the place where she was going to have the meeting, and then she got out of the limousine and she got on a bicycle and rode the bicycle for 100 meters. Oh boy. The climate minister of Spain. And of course the cameras were all there to film her riding her bicycle 100 meters after the private jet and the limousines. And the limo was behind her as well. Like the motorcade and the limo was behind her as she's riding the bicycle. Oh boy. And finally, let's talk about the big cloud world story, which is Vovan and Lexus strike again. and they called Kissinger. They called Kissinger up, and they pretended to be Elensky. And Kissinger bought it. He thought he was talking to Elensky. And the best part of the exchange, the absolute best part of the exchange, let me find it here. Come on, phone. Let's see. Here we go. The pranksters, they called up Kissinger and they asked him, who do you think is guilty of the Nord Stream explosion? And Kissinger, after a long pause, said, now remember, he thinks he's talking to Elensky. He said, I thought you were. Oh my God. And then he was like, I don't want to insult you, Mr. President, and all of this stuff. But he had a long pause and he's like, I thought you did Nord Stream. All right, everybody. That's the video. theduran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, and Rockfin. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. There we go. Use the code. Good day. Take care.